Ireland's oldest city, a place where the streets still follow paths walked by Viking warriors over 1,000 years ago, where a single marriage changed the entire course of Irish history, where Catholic resistance held firm against reformations and conquests until the day the city finally fell, not to swords but to plague. This is Waterford, from the Norman conquest of 1170 to the fall of the city in 1650. The reconstructions you'll see were created with the help of artificial intelligence, letting us visualize Waterford as it actually looked across these centuries. Some visual details may not be perfect, but the history is. If you want to support this channel and help us keep rebuilding the past, consider becoming a member. The link is below. In August 1170, a city that had stood for over 2.5 centuries was about to fall for the first time. Waterford was a fortress city. Its triangular walls, deep defensive ditches, and the great stone tower at the apex of the harbour had beaten back every army that ever came against it, including an Irish king who tried to take it just 30 years earlier. But the Normans were different. Strongbow, a Welsh Norman lord named Richard de Clare, had struck a deal with that same exiled Irish king. Bring soldiers, take back my kingdom, marry my daughter, inherit my lands. His advance force arrived in the summer of 1170 at a headland south of the city. The warriors of Waterford marched out to destroy them. Around 500 men died. It was the first sign that something unprecedented had arrived. On the 23rd of August, Strongbow landed with his full army. The city resisted. The first assault failed. The second failed. On the third, his soldiers found a weakness in the outer defences and broke through. The streets were taken in hours. Amid the ruins, a wedding was held. Strongbow married the Irish princess at Christ Church Cathedral. Within a year, the first king of England ever to set foot on Irish soil landed at that same harbour, not to celebrate, but to contain. Henry II declared Waterford a royal city. Its trade, its harbour, its future, all now belonging to the English crown. The Viking city was gone, the royal city had begun. Once the crown claimed Waterford, the city prospered like never before. In 1215, King John granted it its first royal charter, giving its merchants exclusive rights over the harbour. What followed was 2 centuries of commercial dominance. Ships arrived loaded with wine from Bordeaux and left carrying wool, hides and cattle. Waterford imported more wine than any other port in Ireland, and what came in on those ships financed everything else. Italian bankers from Lombardy arrived to supervise the taxes on wool exports introduced by Edward I in 1275, funding his wars against Scotland. Their name stuck. For 2 centuries, some of the city's most powerful mayors carried the surname Lombard. The city's great rival was the nearby port of New Ross, built upriver by the descendants of Strongbow and the Irish princess. The 2 ports fought each other for generations, sometimes in the courts of England, sometimes in outright river battles. In 1266, 2 men died in one such clash on the river. In 1373, with the Black Death still casting its shadow over trade, Waterford's merchants produced their ultimate weapon, a 4-metre roll of illustrated parchment, the Great Charter Roll, carried to the court of the king to prove their ancient rights. It worked. Waterford kept its monopoly. The Black Death arrived in Ireland in 1347. In a city built on trade and crowded streets, the plague was devastating. Population fell, ships stopped coming. The quays went quiet. But Waterford recovered, and by the 15th century it had become something else entirely, the city that refused to bend. In 1487, a pretender to the English throne attempted to use Ireland as a launchpad for invasion. Waterford refused to recognise him. 8 years later, another claimant arrived with 11 ships and an army, sailing up the river to bombard the city walls into submission. The defenders flooded the marshes east of the city, stranding his fleet in the mud. Cannons mounted on Reginald's Tower opened fire. 2 of his ships went down. After 11 days, the pretender retreated. It was the first recorded use of artillery by an Irish city. A grateful King Henry VII rewarded Waterford with words that would define it forever. The city of Waterford remains untaken. The Reformation changed everything in England. In Waterford it changed almost nothing. When Henry VIII dissolved the monasteries, the city's merchants kept their faith. When Protestant queens and kings demanded conformity, Waterford's population quietly refused. The city became the most defiantly Catholic urban centre in Ireland, a place where the old religion survived not through rebellion, but through sheer, stubborn persistence. By 1642, with Ireland convulsed by rebellion, Waterford became one of the founding pillars of the Confederation of Kilkenny, a Catholic government that controlled 2/3 of the island and functioned for 7 extraordinary years as a de facto independent Irish state. Waterford contributed its port, its wealth and its loyalty. It could not last. In 1649, Oliver Cromwell arrived in Ireland with an army that had just executed a king. He came to Waterford's walls, and for the first time in the city's history, its name felt fragile. In the autumn of 1649, Waterford heard what had happened at Drogheda and Wexford. Cromwell's army had stormed both towns, the garrisons had been put to the sword. The city braced itself. Cromwell arrived at the walls on the 24th of November. He sent the mayor a letter demanding surrender, signed with some irony, "Your loving friend." The city refused. But the Irish winter refused on his behalf. Rain turned the roads to mud, making it impossible to move his heavy artillery into range. Disease tore through his army. Out of 6,500 soldiers, barely 3,000 were still fit to fight by December. His commander died of sickness in the field. On the 2nd of December, Cromwell abandoned the siege and withdrew. He never came back. But his son-in-law did. In the summer of 1650, Henry Ireton returned with a naval blockade sealing the port and artillery, advancing through trenches toward the walls. Inside, the plague was already killing up to 400 people a week. The garrison was down to 700 fit soldiers and 500 pounds of gunpowder. On the 6th of August, the city surrendered. Ireton's soldiers moved through the cathedral, melting down gold and silver chalices. They stripped the organ pipes from their mounts, carried them down to the quay, and cut them up for scrap. But they never found everything. Beneath the cathedral floor, locked in iron chests, lay the only complete set of medieval vestments to survive in Northern Europe, hidden by hands whose names we will never know, and left there undisturbed for 123 years. Waterford had fallen. For the first time in its 700-year history, the city was in the hands of an occupying army. But cities endure, and Waterford, more than most, had learned how. The name that had defined it for a century and a half, the untaken city, had not been wrong. It had been early. Waterford had held longer than almost anywhere else. It had been the last major Catholic stronghold to fall in the east of Ireland. When the soldiers finally left and the city began to rebuild, it carried something no conquest could touch. 1,000 years of layered history beneath its streets, in its stones, in its walls. Viking, Norman, medieval, Catholic, each era absorbed into the next, each refusing to be entirely erased. The story told in this video ends here, in the ruins of 1650. But Waterford's story does not. In part 3, we'll follow the city into its Georgian Renaissance, the birth of crystal, the famine, the birth of the Irish flag, and the street battles of 1922 that helped decide what kind of country Ireland would become. If you've stayed this far, consider leaving a like or a comment. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people. And if you want to support the work of rebuilding the past, the membership link is below. Urbs Intacta, the city remains.